All right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Public Practice Accountants Club. After a few little technical difficulties this morning, we're underway. So, a space for leaders and emerging leaders in the accounting space to come together and connect over the unique challenges and opportunities faced by our industry. So, be at the forefront of the transformation in industry, make valuable connections, and hear some great conversations. And of course, the bonus is you get to earn your CPD points for tuning in. So, our topic this morning is mastering meetings, and particularly the virtual etiquette edition. That's a bit tricky to say early in the morning, etiquette. But first, let me introduce myself. Hello, everybody. I'm Linda Steffens. I'm an accountant, author, and coach. And I particularly love to talk about the business of accounting, business advisory services, and leadership in public practice. And of course, my amazing co-host is with me this morning. Good morning, Kylie Baxter.
Good morning, Linda. Quick intro for myself. Yes, I'm Kylie Baxter. I own and operate a public practice accounting firm here on the Gold Coast. I'm looking forward to this topic this morning because, fun fact about me, I spend about 20% of my time now in volunteering roles. So I sit on committees and advisory boards and councils and whatnot. So the virtual meeting has had quite the rise over the last few years, as we all know. And the etiquette is quite specific these days, but it appears not everyone knows about it. So let's share.
Yes, absolutely. So, are you tired of sitting through unproductive meetings that leave you questioning the value of your time? And if you're anything like Kylie, spending a fair amount of time in meetings, and myself for that matter, some of those meetings certainly can leave you with that questioning thought. So today we are going to deep dive into the art of running efficient and effective meetings that hopefully leave the attendees informed and inspired. So we're going to tackle some of the unique challenges and etiquettes of virtual meetings, equipping you with the skills to deliver exceptional results every time you gather your team or your clients or some other volunteering committee together, and give you some practical tips and tricks for going about that. So what I'd like to start with, Kylie, is just a fairly general chat about meetings in general. And I think they can just be undervalued and overlooked. And we just think that, oh, it's just a meeting. I just hop on, I just talk, or someone will just talk, or someone will tell me what to do. And no one often quite prepares for them or really gives them the resources or the value that they should really be given. And then I think we can go away and then go, oh my goodness, why I'm in all these awful, crazy meetings that waste my time. So that's where I want to start.
All right. Well, the first thing that I want to say is I value anything that I do, and reflect on anything I do as, was that a waste of my time? Yes or no?
Yes.
So whether it's a meeting, whether it's a lunch with my family, whether it's anything, I get to the end of the day and I think, was that a waste of my time? Because particularly in our industry, we sell our time.
Yes.
So utilization in a positive way is the most important thing for us. We cannot make or buy more time. So I think that whole going into life in general with is this going to be a waste of my time approach is a really good attitude to have if you're feeling overwhelmed with time. That's not what we're talking about today, but it triggered me when you mentioned that earlier.
Yes.
As far as meetings go, look, I think I sit in so many of them, and the similar things can be applied to in-person meetings as well as e-meetings, right? And when we talk about e-meetings, we're talking about Zoom meetings, we're talking about Teams meetings.
Yes.
What's that other one, Linda?
Well, I use
go to
Google
the meeting?
Meet a lot.
You use Google Meet?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Look, there's so many different platforms, and that's also part of the problem. Everything's just slightly different, so sometimes you can get into a meeting and the controls are a little bit wonky because you're not quite familiar. But I think we'll get to that. But yeah,
Totally.
there's so many different platforms, but you're exactly right. What we're going to talk about today is in person as well as virtual, because across the board, the same sorts of efficiency and effective measures and also etiquette applies to both.
So the first thing that I would like to say is, and there's a Lion King song about this, and I would woo you all with my great singing, but it's a bit early
come
in the
on,
morning.
are you going to sing for us? Yeah.
But it's called Be Prepared, right? So regardless of whether it's an in-person meeting or it's an online meeting, let's call them online meetings for today's purpose.
Okay.
You need to be prepared. I have found over the last few years that people tend to handle e-meetings in a far more casual way than they will for an in-person meeting. Now, that's fascinating as far as why are we doing that? What's leading us to think? Da, 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 da. And I put it down to this. When it's an in-person meeting, you're looking at your clock, you're going, right, I've got to get there by 1 o'clock. I've got to leave at 20 to 1. I've got to find parking. I've got to do this. Like, you're really going through that preparation. Do I have everything I need? I can't come back to the office, or whatever the story is. Whereas with an e-meeting, we just tend to rely on, Outlook or Slack or Teams to go, bing, your meeting's here, or ooh, someone's opened the room and you're like, quick, join the meeting. Where's my stuff? What have I done? I meant to do that. And I think that's what happens, because sometimes these online meetings can almost be something that we'll do while we're doing other things, or, we're not planning for them. So my number one thing is to be prepared.
Yes.
My number two thing is to treat both versions of meetings with the same respect and courtesy.
Absolutely. I'm going to add professionalism to that as well. I think it was too easy for us with these online meetings and the uptake of online meetings. We went through the whole pandemic, working from home, and all of a sudden we rocked up in our pajama bottoms and and did things like that. No, I don't quite do that either.
Speak for yourself.
Oh, you wouldn't sing for us before, so I'm going to out somebody about pajama bottoms. But I do often wear fluffy slippers, which is fine.
That's fine.
But I think you're right. It became too casual. And the thing is, if we haven't already, and I know this is something that I teach and help other teams that I'm working with to manage, is that it is exactly the same. Just like you were saying with preparation, you should prepare exactly the same and treat it with the same professionalism. So make sure, you've got the same attire on that you would wear for an in-person meeting. Now that could go from board shorts to a suit, but depending on whatever that would be, if you were meeting that client, that team member, that committee in person, how would you be dressed, or how would you present? Because it's the same. They can see you. It's a professional approach, and I think we've let that just slide a little bit too much. And I think we can bring that back to add the professionalism back to the meeting. I think that also triggers something in our brains to say, hey, this is important. I want respect from the meeting, so therefore I should give respect.
I completely agree with you. And I think the importance level of this raises greatly when you are the person running the online meeting. So, if you're the chair, or if you're, the person that has called the meeting, you need to set the tone. So what we're talking about when we're talking about, the professionalism and that sort of thing, is setting the tone for the meeting. Now, if it's a meeting between, two people, like if Linda, if you or I were to catch up, we're fairly casual in our approach with each other. We know each other well. So our casual catch-up approach in real life might be, let's get some lunch or let's have a coffee and we'll, knock this out. So the tone of that meeting is casual, but both of us would come prepared with the things that we need to get a resolution on by the end of that meeting. Same if we were virtual. It wouldn't be, oh, quick, make sure my background's perfect and make sure all of this is right. It would be, hey, here I am. Let's get stuck into these 4 things we need to talk about. So you have to think about your audience, which is the other people that are in the room, if it is an in-person meeting, or in the virtual room, if it's an online meeting. But setting the tone of the meeting is one of the keys to success.
Absolutely. And a pivotal role in any meeting is the chairperson or facilitator. And you must have that person or someone playing that role. And also, I think then we'll go back to preparation, is that some of that tone and almost the expectations, why are we meeting? What are we hoping to achieve? Putting together some sort of agenda is all done before the meeting, So as you said, casual meetings don't necessarily have agendas, but they would maybe have had an email, like you said, hey, Kylie, we need to catch up. I want to knock out these 4 points. So in a funny way, not in a funny way, in just a more casual way, you have put together an agenda. But I think where you've got a slightly more formal meeting, that chairperson or facilitator role, vital to making sure that meeting is effective. And one of the greatest skills that I see undervalued and overlooked in the accounting industry as a whole is the chairperson facilitator role.
Yeah, look, I completely agree. That chairperson or facilitator really has full control. They're the ones that can allow people to speak. They're the ones that can, really make sure the meetings run on time. It's all those really important things. Now, the interesting thing about it is when COVID hit a few years ago and we basically all went to online meetings overnight, there were many of us that had never sat in a board meeting or committee meeting or anything like that where there was a chairperson. Nobody was trained to do this. So these are skills that I think everyone thinks, oh yeah, that's just common knowledge, but actually it's not.
Nope.
So can I tell my story, Lynn? I've got 2 stories. You're going to laugh at
stories, because I know where we're going to go with this story, I think.
Right. Okay, so I was invited to a meeting for a committee that I was interested in sitting on. This was a long time ago, well more than 12 months now. And it was a virtual meeting because the people came from all over. I'm going to say Queensland, it could have been Australia, can't remember. So joined the meeting. It was after hours, sort of that 5:30 mark. I will go on the record and say 5:30 or 6 o'clock, if I do not get some food into me, is the worst time for me for a meeting.
So we need to know ourselves
well enough. I just get a bit like, when's this going to be over?
I need to eat. Fair enough.
Like,
fair enough.
On. Anyway, I joined this meeting and there was several people in the room. Let's say there was maybe a dozen invited, and they were all sort of chit-chatting amongst themselves. And my personal meeting etiquette is that when I join the meeting, if it's silent, I'll say hello to everyone. If they're talking, I won't interrupt. I'll just wave, maybe put a hello in the chat and wait for that break where I can sort of have an interjection. So people were talking and that was fine. They all knew each other quite well. No one really acknowledged my presence. Goodness. I just sort of waved, put a hello in the chat, and that was sort of it. And then the meeting started. Now, I was a guest in this meeting, so they were looking for, my understanding was they were looking for some other people to join this particular committee, and I'd been invited as a guest to see, if it's a good fit and how would I like it. The meeting started and they sort of got stuck into the agenda, and I had this thought about 10 minutes in, I think I've been sent the wrong link and I'm in the wrong meeting because no one has acknowledged
because nobody had said anything to you, right?
No
it's
one.
Like you were invisible.
And it wasn't a large number of people. I said a dozen before. That would have been the absolute maximum. I checked my emails. I was looking at my text messages. Am I on the right meeting? What have I done? Has the person that's invited me made a mistake and sent me to another meeting? What's going on? No, I was in the right meeting. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just observe. Like, obviously, that's what they want. It's an inferred knowledge. I've got it wrong. I'll just observe. It got to 3/4 of the way through the meeting, and the chair said, "Oh, and Kylie, you're here. So introduce yourself."
Oh my gosh.
And I felt totally put on the spot. And to be really honest, a little bit put off as well, because I just sat there. No one had spoken to me. I'd been completely ignored. And then it's, "Oh, tell us about yourself." I had no idea what they wanted to know. You know, I was actually known to quite a few of those people in the room. And one of the, you know, facilitators, I was supposed, not the chair, did sort of say, "Oh, you know, we're glad to have you, welcome." But it was all a little bit too late for that. Yes. So I, me being me, gave myself the 1-minute overview and, you know, threw in a few, like, bit of a joke, self-deprecating. No one laughed. And I got to the end of my 1 minute and there was dead silence.
Oh, dear.
And that's fine. I don't expect people to laugh at my jokes. They're funny to me. But when you finish, when you invite someone to a meeting and you ask them to say something about themselves and they finish, the best way to deal with that is to say, "Thanks so much." Not, "Hey, next agenda item."
Yes. Because that in itself is just disrespectful, you know, that, and whether we realize it or not, you know, again, this comes back to that facilitating skill set. Whether we realized it or not, or if the intention was there, what that did was, you know, you felt very disrespected, felt like, why were you even there, that you were completely ignored and overlooked. And look, if you align that back to an in-person meeting, no one would, you know, if you walked into a room, no one would have completely ignored you. It's impossible to do in a personal meeting. So why is it okay to do it in a virtual meeting? Well, it's not. And, you know, that's the thing, I think, with the one point I wrote down in my notes was the chair or the facilitator's role is to follow the agenda. That is absolutely what they need to do. But the one exception to that rule is when you have a guest in the meeting who is unfamiliar with the meeting, the people in the meeting, or what is the general outcome. So, you know, the chair is also a host or a hostess as such, and they should invite in and welcome a guest very openly. So that is the one exception to the follow the agenda rule. And for the most part with meetings, we've got a whole lot of agenda items that we need to get through. For the most part, the guest does not need to be there for those. They are there for often a very specific reason. I don't know if that was the case for yours, Kylie, or not, but, you know, often we can welcome the guest, deal with the business that the guest is there for, and then we can allow that guest to either leave if they need to leave, or they're welcome to sit in the meeting if that's what you desire. So
that my experience has been that where there is an invited guest, it's listed in the agenda as people that are present, the apologies, the absences, and the guests. So then everyone receiving those agenda items, you know, the meeting notes, which you should, as a general rule, receive an agenda, you know, a week before if it's a very formal meeting and there's a lot of content, or at least the day before if it's sort of a more casual meeting.
Yes.
Everyone in that room should know who is going to be present at that meeting, including guests. Now, in my situation with the story that I just told, it left me with a very sour taste in my mouth, obviously, not really wanting to give up my time to join that committee or anything else for that matter that organisation ran. And the interesting thing for me was it a waste of my time test? Absolutely. 2 hours of my life I'm never getting back. So this is the thing. When we are running meetings, be them in personal and or online meetings, we need to make sure we're not wasting people's time. We've all seen those memes where it's like, well, just went to a 2-hour meeting. That could have been an email, you know.
Exactly. Or the snooze coming out of, you know, the mouth, the Z's coming out of the mouth. It's like, It's crazy. Yeah. So it's about respect. So I want to chat about, in that instance, we're talking about a fairly formal meeting, Kylie,
Yes.
So for most of our practitioners, unless they are doing committees or boards or things like that, they may not come across that very formal meeting session. So
Structured. Yeah.
when we talk about agendas and preparation, where's the line in the sand from formal to informal? Like, let's talk about team meetings, let's talk about client meetings. Do agendas and structure and all of that apply to that as well, do you think?
Arguably, yes. So let's
Yeah.
talk about team meetings first.
Yes.
I think when you call a whole of staff meeting, people are going to wonder what it's about. So
Yes.
I personally don't provide an agenda for team meetings, but I will provide a summary of what there is to discuss.
Okay, so setting
say,
up expectations.
Hey, setting, hey, we're going to have an all staff-wide meeting on Friday morning. Straight away, people should know, well, it's Friday morning, nothing bad's going to happen because I do that on Mondays. So, really, and we're going to talk about this, and this. If there's anything else that anyone thinks that it would be appropriate to raise at that time while we're all together, please let me know, because I'm the one hosting the meeting. Okay.
Yes.
So I invite people to ask me, oh, can we talk about this? Can we talk about that? Did you know that's going on? Da, 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 da. And that really forms the agenda. I don't circulate it because it's not necessary. But what I do is at the beginning of the meeting, welcome everyone, say these are the 3 or these are the 4 things that we're going to cover today. Let's get stuck into it.
Absolutely.
Now,
yes.
I was going to say with clients, do you want to speak first, Linda? Yeah.
Oh, well, I was just going to add on to the team meeting. So there's a number of firms I work with and I help them with their meeting flow, and I'll sit in on the meetings, and I'll sometimes assist in chairing the meetings. And so I always have an agenda just for my purposes. So so I don't go waffling on and going off track and wasting people's time. So that's the first thing. I have someone in the team that prepares that agenda. So not me, but I give them direction around what do we put on the agenda. There are some very standard items that go on there. I mean, we talk about the upcoming social events. We talk about how much money's in the lotto account, the really important things.
Very important things.
Exactly, that must be talked about. But then in there, of course, there's administrative changes. There's also the celebration of wins and, things like that are always there. And upcoming staff leave. That's another one, because this is a small firm and they actually all rely on each other, to sort of fill in different roles if people are away. So it's always very good to have an idea of what sort of leave is coming up. So I do have an agenda. It is prepared beforehand. I don't circulate that one either. But it does go up on a screen as we're having the meeting, which I think just allows everybody to, and look, this team is very familiar with the structure of this meeting. It's been going on for quite some time, and it happens regularly. So it's not called on an ad hoc basis. It does happen once a month. And so, but the agenda, I think, is, it helps the chairperson. It's like, well, what's the next thing that we need to do, which can be important if you can tend to be a bit of a waffler, which I can be a bit of a waffler. There's no doubt about it.
And I think with team meetings, it's really important that we don't let them get sidetracked. They're the easiest ones for it to be like, oh my goodness, an hour's gone and I wanted this to be 20 minutes. So you really do have to keep people focused. And I do want to point out something really interesting, which is when we call meetings and why we call meetings. So Linda, you just raised, we talk about all the important things like, lotto account, what kind of coffee will we buy, and all those sorts of things. The things that people actually, that's the things that upset people, right? In a team environment, particularly a small team. I would never have those items in my meetings because that's what we use our electronic communication for.
Interesting.
So it is. And that's just, I would call that almost a cultural difference between firms, right? Whereas when I hold a meeting, it's for things that could not otherwise be dealt with in Slack, because we are still
Yes.
Slack users because we've been using it
Yes.
for forever and a day.
Yes.
Whereas for you and in that firm, it almost sounds like they're using it as a get together, press the flesh, touch base, make sure everyone's on the same
Absolutely.
page. So
Absolutely.
you need to think that comes back to what is the purpose of this meeting? Be prepared for it and let others be prepared. Because I think, let's say one of my staff was to move to that firm that you're talking about and they went to a meeting that talked about those things. It might be a bit like, why did we have a meeting about that?
Yes.
So you
Yes.
have to think about what the cultural differences are in that space and sharing that with the participants of the meeting.
Exactly, and what everybody can expect. And the one thing that often pops out of myself and the team member putting the agenda together is I'll know I want to talk about something, but it's better off coming from a team member rather than me. So I will actually then say, hey, would you mind? I'll send somebody an email and say, hey, I want to talk about this at the next team meeting. Would you please prepare something and share that with the team? So I do a lot of delegating within that, but well before the meeting, at least a week before, to say, I'd like you to speak about this particular thing. And, that again is about preparation, expectation, structure, I think is, important.
Yeah. And I think from an agenda point of view, when it comes to our client meetings, I would say that we're only really doing that with sort of maybe our advisory clients or maybe our higher level clients, or if it's a tax planning meeting or a specific meeting that we've got set. If it's a general meeting, what we really find in practice is clients call the meeting. So I always get one of my team to reach out and ask the client, hey, what's the purpose of the meeting? Just in case we need to prepare for it, give us some more information so that tone is there.
Absolutely.
But the interesting dynamic is that despite the client calling the meeting, because they might be selling their business, want to discuss, whatever,
yes,
they expect us as the professional to be the host.
Absolutely.
And this is where the disconnect can come in, particularly in client meetings. And once you get over that, 5 minutes, hello, chit chat, what's happened since the last time I spoke to you, it can be a little bit awkward, especially if you don't love online meetings, to harness the power in that time and go, right. So I do it in a one line. I say, hey, thanks so much for booking this meeting. I know you told Lisa or whoever that I spoke to in my office that you wanted to have a chat about blah, blah, blah. Can you share some more information about that with me?
Yes.
And then I've taken control, which is what they expect because they're paying us for our time and expertise.
Yes.
But I haven't gone off assuming that they're talking about da-da-da-da. Now, often I have assumed that they're talking about da-da-da, and I've done a bit of prep work, particularly when they want to know, how much tax am I going to have to pay if I da-da-da-da-da? But I want them to tell me exactly what I want, because if I was to roll in and go, right, I know the meeting's about this, I've done some calculations, let's get started. 95% of the time, clients will sit there and nod and they'll get to the end. They'll say, thanks so much.
Yes.
Actually, it was the other property that I was thinking about selling.
Yes.
And you're like,
dang it. All my research is down the plug hole. Yes.
Yeah. So that's the disconnect I find in virtual meetings in our profession. The client will call the meeting, but we're supposed to really, chair that meeting, for want of a better word, or really direct the meeting. It's also our job to keep the meeting on time.
And
so
on
we
track.
have to be and on track. We have to be comfortable in the same way we're comfortable in an in-person meeting. That if this client says, oh, by the way, and you think, geez, this is going to be a 30-minute conversation and we've got 5 minutes left.
Yes.
You have to protect everyone's time and be respectful to both parties. And I think in an online meeting, that's where people go, oh, yeah, sure. And they'll just answer it.
Yes.
As opposed to in person, they'd say, I'm so sorry, I've got someone waiting for me in the, in reception. I just can't. Can we make another time, or I'll call you, or I'll send you an email? This is where the lines get blurred, right? Between the do's and don'ts of online meetings versus in-person meetings. My general rule of thumb is if you wouldn't do it in an in-person meeting, don't do it in an online meeting. So that comes down to a heap of things.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the thing is too that there certainly is Well, we're saying there should be no difference between a personal meeting and a virtual meeting. And I'm very much like that as well. So, there's a whole lot of other little etiquette things that you need to be aware of with virtual meetings, because, we're removed from the personal environment. So you think you can get away with stuff that you actually can't.
Yes.
I think too, Roy's just popped in the chat that meetings are, he doesn't see them as not necessarily one of his strong points, but he finds in virtual meetings that it's difficult to read people's body language. Roy, if I was to answer that, I think that simply is just a bit of a practice thing. And I think that's also something that, the more that you use the virtual meetings, the easier it does become. And, knowing where to look. And my number one tip, particularly because I'm an introvert, and, this is something, distractions for us can interrupt our flow of thoughts and words and all of those things. One of the biggest distractions in an online meeting is looking at your own picture. Looking at your own image, sitting there talking, waving your hands around, doing whatever you're doing. That is the biggest, most off-putting thing, I'd say, for probably most people, but definitely for an introvert. So most online meetings, and it's a big energy drain too, by the way. So most online meeting platforms have a setting that you can turn off your own view. You can't turn off your video or your camera because other people need to see you, but you can turn off the view. So you at least can't see yourself, and you can only see the other people in the meeting. Now, Roy, that may be why you're struggling a little bit with reading other people's body language, because you're just naturally drawn to looking to yourself. You can't help it. You're naturally focusing on what you're doing, and am I sitting up straight? Am I, not pulling a funny face? Am I doing whatever? So that may be a little bit part of it, but that's my number one tip. Turn off your own view. It has made, when I did that about 2 years ago, and it has made the hugest difference in my like or dislike for virtual meeting. I love it. I love the virtual world. I work in the virtual world 99% of the time. And it's a skill in its own right, I think,
Yes. I will say to you, Roy, I'll just challenge you to think more of it like it's a telephone conversation.
Yeah,
I'm sure that you
good
talk
point.
to your clients on the phone all of the time. That gives you zero body language. Really, all you can hear is the tone in their voice. You can't see them at all. We've all had those times where we picked up the phone and called a client and they've been very short, and you have to think to yourself, oh, what have we done? What's happened there? It's probably that you caught them at the grocery store while they were trying to force their toddler into the back seat or something like that, So I would just say, with virtual meetings or online meetings, it's actually that step up from a telephone call. You can at least see the people. You can see if they're busy and distracted doing other things. There's all these opportunities. So, Linda, I think that we should get into the, perhaps do's and don'ts of online meetings. We've done the overarching one, which is don't do anything that you wouldn't otherwise do in an in-person meeting.
Correct.
And some of these need to be addressed. So the first one that I've got is to avoid multitasking. So when you join an online meeting, it is so easy, because generally it's like, the meeting started, quick join. Just in the middle of this email, I'll quickly finish it off.
Yes.
You would never allow a client into your boardroom and you're like, I'm just finishing up the notes from my last meeting. Just sit there silently and watch me while I do that.
Exactly.
Talk amongst yourselves. You'd never do it, right? However, what I will say is, in some in-person meetings, people do multitask, particularly if they're there as a note taker, or if they're there as an observer, or if they're there as a guest that only really needs to contribute to one part, but they've been invited to the whole meeting. So sometimes they are multitasking, they're looking things up, they're doing those. So it doesn't mean you have to look like this and just smile and be, so engaged 100% of the time. But it does mean don't finish your file note to the client before, don't check your emails, don't do any of those things, because it is inappropriate and it's not the best use of your time.
Well, you are much better if there is something urgently that needs to be done. You're much better and I can't believe I'm saying this, but being a minute late for the meeting, or and if that's
Linda's never late.
No, I try not to be late. Look, occasionally it happens.
You aren't.
But is to not turn your camera on, is to not. They may know that you're there, but it's just it's just the same example as letting somebody wait in your waiting room, for just an extra minute while you finish what you're doing. If you can't for the life of you, put it down, and it's absolutely vital that you finish it. So that's what I'd be saying about that. But yes, the whole multitasking thing, whether you have your own perception around looking at that, people can tell when you're not interested. People can tell when you are doing things. You turn your camera and your microphone off, guaranteed you walked away from the meeting, or you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. So they're all telltale signs that perhaps you're being, well, if I'm going to call it straight, you're being disrespectful to the other people that are in the meeting, because you're not giving them your full attention. And that's just not appropriate.
Yeah.
Because, if you want respect from them, well, you've got to give respect.
100%. Okay, pop quiz, Linda.
Yeah.
How many people need to be in the meeting where you need to automatically mute yourself during the meeting? So at what number does it become we should have our microphones and cameras on, to we should have our microphones off, to it's fine to have your microphone and your camera off?
I don't think there's a typical accountant answer here, but I don't think there's an actual line in the sand. I think it depends on who's in the meeting. Now, if I think about it, I've got a team of 10 that I work with, and they are very au fait with how to work in virtual meetings. So this is harking back to one of the things with using microphones and cameras. Now, microphones will isolate a voice, so it can only pick up one voice, or, otherwise it gets all blurry and people can't hear. So it's not talking over people. So this particular team are very good. One person will speak, they will finish, and then the next person will. So they're very good with letting that happen. Now, if you've got somebody else that I can think of, another team that I work with, they're all microphones off, because they all want to talk at once. And, it's like, no, we're going to have to do a raise your hand, who's got the talking stick type thing going on with them. So I think it's you've got to make a call, but any more than, I'd say any more than 3 or 4, it starts to get, a bit of a management thing that you really got to work hard as a chair to direct the conversation and keep it under control.
Completely agree. I think when we're in online meetings with our clients, it's never microphone off, because you need to be engaged all the time. When we're in meetings with a group of people and there's an agenda, and it is about more than 5, I would say, definitely microphones off, cameras on. In my opinion, the only time it is acceptable to have cameras off if you're joining more of a webinar.
Yes.
So you've been invited to a meeting, but really it's only comment in the chat. We'll answer your questions in the chat. Don't talk, because we've got a lot of stuff to go through. I think then it's appropriate to have your camera off, but not at the beginning of the meeting and not at the end. You really want to show people that you are present, show your face, smile, wave, do the right thing in that space. Much like you might attend an in-person meeting and it might be one of your staff that's managing it, but you jump in and you say, hi, I just wanted to say hi. So-and-so will really look after you well. And then you might pop back in at the end and say, oh, nice to see you. Thanks for coming in. Bye. So just really align these online meetings to what you would do.
Yes.
Now, I want to talk about backgrounds of online meetings.
Okay.
Do you know that there is a website where you can put a photo of your background in and it will rate it?
Really? No, I did not know that.
The lovely Heather Smith taught me about this, and I found it fascinating, because she is the knower of all amazing things such as that.
Technology tips. If anybody out there, follow Heather for any other amazing technological tips.
She's awesome. So different background for different things,
Mm.
right? So think about if it's a client meeting and you might be doing it as an online meeting from home, would you do it in your bathroom?
Mhm.
Probably not.
No, probably
Would you
not.
do it in your dining room? Possibly. Think about your background. Now, I'm not talking about creating a pretty virtual background. Like, this is
No.
just my boring old everyday desk behind me. Like, you can
Yes.
that cord's annoying me. Like, there's stuff, right? But think about where you are coming from when you are joining a meeting, and the reason that we're doing more and more online meetings is because it's more convenient. We don't have to
Yes.
travel, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be in our office all of the time. So recently, and not to get too sidetracked, but I bought myself a walking pad with a stand-up desk. Now, every time I
Oh.
have a meeting in my office, my little walking pad is in the corner. I was a bit like, I should move that. That looks really ugly. It's up against the wall. And then I was like, nah, if I had ever had a client in my office, I wouldn't be like,
You wouldn't be
quick,
moving it
they're
and
coming
trying to
into my
hide it.
office.
Yes.
Exactly. And mostly I do meetings in the boardroom, but
Yes.
still, if I had a client in here, I wouldn't just rush to hide it. So that's my personal choice, and it's what I'm comfortable with. But we really need to think about our background as far as that goes. And my other thing is background noise. Linda and I had a small technological
Yes.
hitch this morning
We did.
where when we spoke to each other, our voices repeated themselves about 20 times with a lovely screeching sound.
Yes.
We were both like, that's not acceptable. We
No.
can't do that. We're going to have to find another way. And Linda amazingly fixed it really, really quickly. But should you have a meeting in a food court?
Yes.
Don't know. Maybe if you have one of those awesome noise cancelling headphones, then it's okay. But what you also need to make sure is that it's not noise cancelling just from a headphone point of view, but also from a microphone point of view. So I've got a great headset that works really well for me. But my microphone, even though it's supposed to only direct my voice, will direct another voice if someone pops in and goes, are you on a meeting? Which happens all the time. And the person will hear someone else say, hey, were you on a meeting? As crystal clear as if I was to speak myself.
Yes.
So just be aware of all of those things as well when we're thinking about that online meeting space. Do you have any like that to add, Linda?
I absolutely do. And it is sometimes, meetings can, whether they run a little bit late or we've not left quite enough time to get ourselves where we need to be for the next thing we're doing, something like that. And because it's an online meeting, you can do it on your phone or whatever, and you're transitioning to the car or you're walking somewhere outside, and particularly wind is very distracting. You seriously just get this noise behind your voice, and for anybody that's on the meeting, it's just very distracting for them. Look, if the worst case scenario happens with that and you do have to move, I think you make it very obvious, look, I'm just having to go here, there, or whatever as we wrap up. I hope that's okay. So again, that's showing respect to whomever is on the meeting with you. Yeah, but outside noise, very good point, Kylie. You might have amazing noise cancelling headphones, but there's very little, the microphones aren't as good as the headphones. So some are better than others, but the microphones generally not. Yeah. So
speaking of microphones, that's something that you should always do before you enter the room.
Oh yes,
check the settings. It's with It's with every single online option that I've ever used, Zoom, blah, 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 anything. It says, hey, do you want to do a test before you enter? The number of people that just go, no, enter the room, and then they're like, for those in Clubhouse listening, I just mouthed, I can't hear you, something's wrong.
Yes.
And I'm like, why didn't we test this before we came in? I don't understand that. For me, the testing of the microphone and checking your camera is exactly the same as, hey, I've got to get to blah, blah.
Yes.
Where am I going to park?
Yes.
You
idea.
need to do that preparation.
Great
so
tip.
just, it sounds basic, but people don't do it anymore.
No. And again, I think that just harks right back to the beginning of where we said virtual meetings we've allowed ourselves to treat them as a more casual experience when really they're not. For the most instance, they, what we've been saying all along, treat them exactly as an in-person meeting and everything about them. So, look, I think we have covered so much this morning. It's been huge. So we definitely have talked plenty of practical tips and tricks for running efficient meetings that respect everyone's time. So that was definitely a big theme of today's room. We've talked about some strategies to engage and empower our participants so they feel valued and heard. So, those sorts of things were around the facilitator, making sure that we're managing the discussion, making sure we're staying on time, that we're staying on track, and also even helping everybody to take a turn at speaking if you've got a larger group and perhaps some are, more talkative than others. Some people might not want to speak up, but everybody's got a right to sort of say or say what they feel they need to say. So, talking about the seamless and professional experience of virtual meetings. Practice using the controls. Check your camera, check your microphone before you go in, because the plethora of platforms that we use day in, day out, the settings are all just a little bit different. Don't multitask in your virtual meetings. People can see, and they can also see when you're not paying attention, just as you would in a personal meeting. So fostering collaboration and achieving tangible outcomes, again, that harks back to that facilitator role. Asking questions. Kylie, you gave a really great example earlier on around you go into the meeting and you don't assume what the client wants to talk about. This was a client meeting. You actually ask them, here's what you said you wanted to talk about. Give me some more information. So open-ended questions, making sure we're listening, we're paying attention, all very important things to do. And of course, ways to overcome common challenges with virtual meetings and building meaningful connections. We talked about not being able to, feeling like we can't read the body language in virtual meetings, but again, neither can you on a phone, as Kylie rightly pointed out. So you can actually see people on a virtual meeting, so it's surprising that there probably is some stuff there that you can pick up, certainly over and above a phone call. And my hot tip there was turn off your self-view. It is very distracting, so make sure you can't see yourself, just that everybody else can see you. So that's also very important. And don't talk over people. Very important that the chair or the facilitator helps the meeting do that, because I think that's almost the number one thing around the effectiveness of meetings. Kylie, what's your summary or your takeaways from this morning? There's so many.
Oh, so many. Look, my takeaway is we're not perfect. These are learned skills. They're not something that we come equipped and ready to go with. So, just remember that it's best practice sort of thing. It's our opinion. If you can take one thing away from today and implement it, it will improve the quality and outcomes of your meetings, be them in person or online. Last thing I want to say is I have probably now become so accustomed to online meetings that it's my in-person meetings that are more difficult for me, where I have to be planning. And I'll share with you quickly, because this is hilarious given my earlier story. I attended a meeting recently with a guest that I had invited, and it was in person. I introduced her to all of the people before the meeting started, and we sat down, and the chair was running late. So I began to chair the meeting and overlooked formally welcoming that person and inviting them to ask questions and explaining the general role. And we literally got to point one, and the person started talking, and I was like, oh my goodness. And I had to interrupt and stop the meeting and say, I'm so sorry, I was exceptionally rude. Welcome, person, please ask any questions you like. I am so sorry. And then it was the joke of the whole meeting, make sure you note in the evaluation that Kylie didn't welcome our guest. But that's the thing. You know, I've
Yes.
gotten so accustomed to
Yes.
having the agenda, going, right, there's the guest, welcome them, that in person, when they were sitting right next to me, I forgot. We're not perfect. All you can do is your best.
That's exactly right.
And our best is genuinely good enough.
Absolutely. It always is. Yes, you're 100% correct. And yes, I'd agree with that statement that it's, you know, I too am very comfortable in a virtual meeting session. And yes, become slightly more confronted now with my personal meetings. So absolutely. All right. So next month, we've got a little bit of a date change or a day change. We're doing it one day earlier. So if you've got a repeating calendar item in for the first Wednesday of the month, well, you'll miss us next week if you like to join us live. next month rather, not next week. So we're moving it to the first Tuesday only for next month because both Kylie and I have got some travel arrangements that we need to do. It's very difficult to do a live show on an aeroplane. So next month it is Tuesday the 3rd of October. So Tuesday the 3rd of October at 7 a.m. and we'll be chatting all about striking the balance, navigating mentoring, training and development for your team, both in a professional and personal growth. So there's so much out there for us to do. How do we find that balance between all of those things? So that's going to be a great chat too, but that's going to be the first Tuesday, everybody. Remember that. Change your calendars. But I hope you have a wonderful month. Thank you for a great chat this morning, Kylie. This was amazing. So much good information, and you're amazing as always. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Awesome job. We'll see everyone next month. Bye.
Bye.